Before you stand, a recap, Revelation chapter 13, or rather the end of chapter 12. We had the dragon, right? This great sign in the heaven, there's a dragon. The woman is the great sign, and then there's another sign, and that's just the dragon whose appearance is great. And that dragon is trying to consume the child of the woman, but is unsuccessful. She is given a place, the place, in the wilderness, where she is taken care of for 1,200 days. It rounds out to 3.5 years. And then there's war in heaven. Michael and his angels against dragon and his angels. When the dragon and his angels were not able to overcome, they were too weak to defeat Michael, and so he is cast out. The dragon is cast out, thrown out of heaven. And what does he do? He lands upon the earth. Woe to the earth and the sea, for there he has gone. And then so the dragon is no longer referred to as the dragon. He's referred to as the serpent. And the serpent tries to seduce the bride. And out of his mouth comes this flood of heresy, the Judaizing heresy that came to the church. But that fails. Paul is successful, along with the other apostles, in defeating the heresy of the Judaizers. And so the serpent goes back to being dragon. It pursues now the seed, the children, who are still the church, but now it's the church no longer in the picture of the bride, but as the warrior son. And that's where we pick up our story. In fact, we are going to begin, if you would rise, we're going to begin in chapter 12, verse 17, and then read to verse 10 of chapter 13. So here is God's word. So the dragon was enraged with the woman and went off to make war with the rest of her seed, who keep the commandments of God and have the witness of Jesus. And the dragon stood on the sand of the seashore. Then I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads, and on his horns were 10 diadems, and on his heads were blasphemous names. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like those of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as if it had been slain fatally. And his fatal wound was healed, and the whole earth marveled and followed after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon because he gave his authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast, and who is able to wage war with him?" And there was given to him a mouth, speaking great boasts and blasphemies, and authority to act for 42 months was given to him. And he opened his mouth in blasphemies against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, that is, those who dwell in heaven. And it was also given to him to make war with the saints, and to overcome them. And the authority over every tribe and people and tongue and nation was given to him. And all who dwell on the land will worship him, everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who has been slain. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is destined for captivity, to captivity he goes. If anyone kills with the sword he must be killed. Here is the perseverance and the faith of the saints. May the Lord bless the reading of his word. You may be seated. All right, we begin back again in verse 1. The dragon stood on the sand of the seashore. We start there. First sentence. The dragon stood on the sand of the seashore. There's a lot going on in that one sentence, if you're not catching on, right? First, we understand here that the dragon is standing in this intermediary space between the land and the sea. That's what a seashore is, right? It's where land and sea are meeting together. So here the dragon is standing on both the land and the sea. We already had a picture of someone standing on the land and the sea before, didn't we? We saw that in chapter 10 of Jesus, right? Jesus had 1 foot in the sea and 1 foot on the land. So it's not quite the same. He doesn't have quite the same power as Jesus does, but he is mimicking it. He's imitating it. He is showing, he's trying to show that he is the sovereign ruler over the land, Israel, and the sea, the Gentiles. That's where he has come. And he has come and he is summoning up this beast that comes out of the sea. We will see that there are 2 beasts. There's the beast of the sea, and there's the beast of the land. First comes, summoned up, is the beast of the sea. Nevertheless, he is not in the sea, the dragon, which here we refer to as Satan, right? Satan is not in the sea. He is summoning up the beast of the sea from the land. Where was Satan cast down into? We read this before back in chapter 8 and then reaffirmed in chapter 12. Satan, when he is cast out of heaven, is sent into the temple, okay, on the land. Wormwood. His doctrine comes out from the temple's rivers and pollutes the land. Okay? So that's where he lands. And from the temple, Satan summons up the sea beast. Now he's on the sea shore. This is where beasts are summoned, by the way. And beast does not necessarily require the connotation of evil. Okay? Sometimes we see it that way because the image of the beast is referring to Satan, right? Beastliness, or getting close to beastliness, is seen as anti-human, right? But beasts in of themselves are not bad, right? God made them, they were in the garden, they all lived in harmony, it was all good, right? Animals sort of just like to hang out with people, right? Now, I don't know if you've experienced this or not, but generally speaking, animals just kind of like to hang out with you. And I don't even mean just the domestic kind, but especially the domesticated kind, just sort of like hanging around you. Birds of the wild nature, I don't know if you've experienced this, I can say I've experienced it numerous times, they just sort of waltz up to you and hang around you. Now, if you get too close, they fly off, right? But they generally kind of come close to you. Well, that's been since the garden, right? Human-animal relations, generally pretty good, right? Okay, not to quote a George Bushism there or not, but human-animal relations, generally good. But the serpent seduces the beasts into perverted action. All right? And we're going to look at Daniel 7 a few times this evening, but this is our first time. So if you want to, I don't know, bookmark it with your thumb or something, we'll flip there a couple times. Daniel 7. I'm going to bookmark it myself with my fancy little ribbon here. Daniel chapter 7, we read of the summoning of the beasts, which are imperial powers. Okay? It says, starting verse 2, Daniel answered and said, I was looking in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were doing what? Stirring up the great sea. And four great beasts were coming up from the sea, different from one another. I'll stop there for now. Just want you to know, that's where the beasts come from the sea. Well, it's not, just sort of, that's real neat, Brother Aidan. Animals come from the sea in the Bible. No, not quite. Only the birds and the fishes do that. The other ones, they're made out of the dust just like we are. They aren't given souls like we are, but they're made out of the dust just like us. But what these beasts are the Gentile powers. All right? It's Babylon. It's Persia. It's Macedonia. And then the four Hellenistic powers after that. And then it's Rome. Rome is the one that doesn't really look like any particular beast, but it's more terrifying than all the other beasts. So that's why they come from the sea, because the sea is the Gentile nations, and that's where the beasts come from. Now, God summons these beasts in Daniel 7 for what? To be a terror to the chosen people? No, to protect them. Right, so that's their purpose. Their purpose is to protect. They're animals that protect, right? Going back to our little analogy here of the garden with the animals, what else do animals like to do? If they come to like you, they like to guard you too, right? Even little ones that have no business trying to do it, right? Brother Logan and Connor, they got a dog about that big. Oh, he's a fierce one. He doesn't like it when you come into his territory and their territory, right? He's that big. You could step on him, he'd be dead. All right, that would be the end of him. But they're guardian dogs, all right? Beasts are guardians, but they can be perverted, and that's what Satan is doing. He's perverting the work of these beasts. And see how he continues to try to imitate God. Because who else, notice how God is depicted here. I was looking in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. We've heard that picture before, all the way back in Genesis, right? And the Spirit was hovering over the waters of the deep, right? And what happens when the Spirit does that? the days of creation start happening and the world starts having order. Order starts coming into being in the midst of the chaos. And so that's what's happening. Now, the four winds of the earth in this, in the quarters of the earth in this, here it's actually of heaven. The four winds of heaven here are referring to the saints, all right? But it's the Spirit through the saints. So that's true of us today too. We can summon up guardian beasts to protect us, but it's through the Spirit. The Spirit does that work through us. So it's not that we can just do it of our own ability, but that's the picture there, right? The chosen people, the four winds of heaven, summon up these beasts by the Spirit. The Spirit does this through them, and these beasts come into being. Now, the other big thing we want to notice before we move any further in this text is that it is the sand of the seashore. A phrase like that should not just go unnoticed in our ears, right? That is a very big phrase in the Old Testament. Do we remember that? Seashore, the sand of the seashore. Abram is promised, your children shall be like the sand on the seashore. And then Solomon, when he becomes king, and rest is finally, and peace comes to Israel. They're finally given rest. After all those kings, all those judges, they finally receive rest under the rule of Solomon, whose name is a Prince of Peace, right? Is what? That the people were like the sands of the seashore. Okay, so where is he? Where is he? This corruption and perversion is happening through apostate Judea. Apostate Judea are always the ones who are whipping and perverting the Gentiles against the Christians, right? Generally speaking, Gentiles aren't really caring that much about Christians, other than maybe converted. They'll convert, but otherwise they don't bother. But who keeps telling them, hey, they're blaspheming your gods? Who keeps telling them, hey, these are just a trouble sect. You got to get rid of them. It's the apostate Jews. And they aren't content to just do it in their own towns. I mentioned this, I think it was last week. They will chase Paul, right, to other towns to make sure that they know, here is this troubler that has come. You need to deal with them. You need to deal with these Christians before they grow. It is the apostates who are the sand of the sea. All right, so that's our opening. And so what does John see after this dragon stands on the sand of the seashore? He sees that a beast comes up out of the sea, having 10 horns, 7 heads, and on his horns were 10 diadems, and on his heads were blasphemous names. I'm not going to recover all of this other than to say, who does this look like? The dragon, right? It's the exact same image. It's the exact same image as we had of the dragon. And what I wanted to point out earlier, back in chapter 12, when I did bring this up, is now having its fulfillment here, is that the dragon back in 12 is not Rome. It's Satan. Now, the historical picture is Rome. Now we are in history. Before we weren't in history. Before we were in the heavens. Right? We were outside of time. Now we're in time. And so now it is Rome. But now there's something very troubling here. Because Rome doesn't look like a guardian beast anymore. It looks exactly. It looks identical. 7 heads. 10 diadems. Blasphemous names. 7 blasphemous names, which we covered last week in the morning. The 7 blasphemous names of Satan. They all now are possessed by Rome. Rome has now taken on the image of the dragon. That will make more sense then when we get to the end of chapter 13, when we discuss the image of the beast and the taking and buying in the 666. We'll promise we'll get there and explain all that. But you see the beginnings of it here. That Rome has taken on already the image of the dragon, and that image is the image of the beast, is conformed to the image of the dragon. So those who are worshiping the image of the beast are worshiping whom? The dragon, Satan. Okay? So the beast from the sea is not the dragon, but the beast looks like the dragon. Right? When man is not conformed, or being conformed to the image of Christ, what image does he possess? He possesses a serpentine image. He gets closer. I like the way that St. Augustine puts it. As man descends into sin, he gets closer to the earth and begins to eat the dust like the serpent. We lose our function of our arms and legs, and we begin to slither about on our bellies. That's what happens when we are not conformed to the image of Christ. We become more and more serpentine. Now, that's because why? God created man in what? In the image of God. We are image bearers by nature. You've probably heard this before, right? God created us to worship, so we will worship something, right? You've heard that? Maybe not? All right. Maybe it's the first time you heard it. But if you are made to worship, what are you going to do? Worship. Okay? We were made to worship God, and so if we are worshiping not Him, we are taking the worship that was designed for Him and giving it to something else, to another or something else. Well, the same is true that if we are made in the image of God to bear an image, we will bear some image. We will either bear the image of our Father through the Son Jesus Christ, who is the perfect image of the Father, or we will be conformed to that which we worship, which ultimately is Satan. All right, you're not going to go down the street. Now, there's going to be one or two people you may come across down the street who will say, "Yeah, I'm being conformed to the image of Satan." Those guys are just a bunch of, edgelords. Don't mind them. But I'm saying the folks that most people you come across who are far away from Christ, who are worshiping all sorts of idols, you say, "You are worshiping Satan. You are in the image of Satan." They're going to say, "No, I'm not." And so it was true with these apostates. You went up to your average Jew in that first century, apostate Jew, and you said, "You're in the image of Satan, right?" Said, "No, I'm not. I'm of God." In fact, if you're a Gentile believer, what are you talking about? You're not made in the image of God. I'm made in the image of God. I'm from Abraham's loins. Who knows what sort of mutt genealogy you come from. You're not in the image of God. But it was reversed. And Jesus pointed this out multiple times, right? You're of your father the devil, you brood of vipers, on and on it goes. You're of your father the devil. He's a murderer from the beginning. So these apostates, and I'm focusing on them because that's the focus of Revelation 13, but I really want to stress, it's anyone outside of Christ is conforming their image to something, and that something at the very back of it is Satan. If you go all the way back, if you dig and rummage through all the idols, Satan is there behind it all, and that is what they are worshiping. Now, I will mention back again Daniel chapter 7, the 10 horns and the 7th head, and we will go through how that relates. Particularly, we're going to look at the beasts here so that we understand the description of the guardian beast a little bit better, all right, as we move from verse 1 to 2. So going back to Daniel 7, verses 4 through 8, we read, "The first was like a lion and had the wings of an eagle. I kept looking until its wings were plucked, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a heart of a man was given to it." Who is that? Verse 4. Who are we describing there? It's Nebuchadnezzar. Okay? Nebuchadnezzar is the first one. He is the lion with the wings of eagle, but he is plucked. Right? And then he stands up and he has a heart of a man. Is that not what we read of in Daniel? Right? Of Nebuchadnezzar? What happens to Nebuchadnezzar? "Look at this wonderful empire I have made." Turned into an animal, right? And he's got feathers, his hair grows, and his nails, and nasty like a lion, and all the rest of it. He's eating grass like an ox, and all the rest of it. Very terrible thing, right? And then after 7 years, God returns his sanity to him, and what does he do? He confesses God, the God of the universe. And he becomes a man. A heart is given to him like that of a man. So that's Nebuchadnezzar. Second, "And behold, another beast, a second one, in the likeness of a bear, and was raised up on one side, and 3 ribs were in its mouth between its teeth, and thus they said to it, 'Arise, devour much meat.'" All right, who's that? That's Medo-Persia. Right? That's both Cyrus and Darius. And Cyrus will later be called also Darius, so that's not entirely helpful, but I think you get the picture, right? There's Cyrus and Darius. That is the Medo-Persians. Okay? That's the bear. Next, after this I kept looking, and behold, another one like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. All right. The reason why I'm pointing those 4s out and writing out these numbers here is because as the imperial beast is coming into scene, we will see in verse 2, Rome, the imperial Rome beast is all the beasts together, right? Has a mouth, speak of a lion. It's got feet like a bear. Has the imaging of a leopard. All right, so it's bringing them all together. So the 7 heads here are related then to the number. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Alexander, and then the 4 heads are Hellenistic Syria, Hellenistic Egypt, Hellenistic Rome. That gets us to 6, right? At this point in time, we are dealing with Hellenistic Rome. And if you don't know what that means, it just means a Greco-Rome, okay? A Greek Rome. The last head, then, is given to us in verses 7 and 8. And here we hear the names and the boasting and the blasphemies. After this, I kept looking in the night vision, and behold, a 4th beast, fearsome and terrifying and extraordinarily strong, and it had large iron teeth. It devoured and crushed, and trampled down the remainder with its feet, and it was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. While I was contemplating the horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the roots before it. And behold, this horn possessed eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great boasts. We talked about that before. That's the description there at the end with the 1 horn coming out of the 3 horns of the civil war that took place after Julius Caesar is assassinated between Octavius, Lepidus, and Mark Antony, in which Octavius comes out the victor, and he starts going by a boastful name, right? None of us remember his name by Octavius. Hopefully some of us remember historically this name, though, Augustus Caesar. Augustus meaning divine one, okay? Augustus, the divine one. So that is Daniel. I think that's about it for Daniel this evening. So hopefully you got that through. You got Babylon, Medo-Persia, Alexander, Hellenistic Syria, Hellenistic Egypt, Hellenistic Rome, and then the last being imperial Rome. Augustus Caesar, imperial Rome. Now the diadems we mentioned before is the false high priest. The blasphemous names are the names of Satan. All right, now let's look at verse 2 because we learn a little bit more about this. Beast, which Daniel said was more terrifying than the others. It says, the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like those of a bear, and his mouth like that of the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. Okay, so we got a lot of 3s here that take place. If you remember this morning, how Bepido was speaking about the several 3s that take place in Psalm 51. We got a lot here, several 3s. So first we want to know that the picture of the beast is like a leopard, a mouth of a lion, feet like a bear, and mouth of a lion. This is reverse order. Okay, it's reverse order from that which we read in Daniel, right? We read in Daniel what? Lion, bear, leopard. Now we're reading leopard, bear, lion. So it's going in reverse order, showing more of that idea of a perversion, all right? But we want to note this, that the image, the aspect of this beast is leopard, okay? The main feature of it, the main form of this beast is a leopard, okay? That's important because it's not a lion with leopard heads or bear feet. It's not a bear with leopard feet and lion mouth and so on. So it's a leopard is the main form, okay? That the other attributes are, in a sense, like adjectives on, right? They're manipulating the picture, but the original picture here is the leopard. The aspect is the leopard, and that is because this Rome is Hellenistic. It is Greek, and I've been pushing this, and I know you're going, I don't see the significance of this, but I'm telling you, it is very significant because this is the Oecumene Rome. This is not a Rome that is outside This is not just a random Gentile power. This is the anointed power of God, the ecumene, to rule over the world. That is which is being perverted. Okay? And remember, Rome takes on a Hellenistic view of itself, even at the time of Augustus Caesar. Okay? And I'll kind of get to this momentarily, but each iteration of the beast already had the next beast overlapping with it. Okay, I'll get to that more in a moment. But my point is that even though imperial Rome is coming into the scene with Augustus Caesar, its finality is not going to come until Nero. It's not going to see its completion. Nero is going to be that last beast, right? That perverted beast. Octavius is still Hellenistic. Why? Here's a little bit of your history note for you, okay? When Augustus becomes Caesar, he has a little work written for him that works as a propaganda piece, like this is, yeah, I'm actually supposed to be emperor, and here's our myth that proves that. It's a little book called the Aeneid. I don't know if you've heard of it or not, but it's like, I don't know, 60% of it is just the Odyssey, right? But from a Latin perspective. But what we learn from not the Iliad, I mix them in my head. The Aeneid is that Rome comes from the Trojans. Okay, have you heard of the Trojan horse, right? Remember the awful thing that happens to Troy? It gets destroyed from the inside by whom? The Greeks, right? The Trojans were a Greek city-state. They just weren't part of the larger Hellas of Agamemnon. Well, some survivors escape, and they go, and through much of the myth, right? There's a whole book in between there, but eventually the end point is they found the city of Rome. Okay? So they identify with a Greek background. They do. It isn't until later that they're going to really scrub out that, no, we're really Latins. We're really something different. And that's biblically going to take place here as we're reading. So it has the aspect of a leopard. So here's the perverted image of the beast here. It has a form of a leopard, it has the power of a bear, and it has a voice of a lion. Okay, so form, power, voice. The leopard is what it looks like. It looks like a leopard, terrifying visage of iron teeth, as we read. It's the image. The bear is what it does. Okay, so if the leopard is what it looks like, the bear is what it does. Trample. Okay, that's the power it's given, trampling, and we read that back in chapter 11, right? The Gentiles were given a period of time of power to trample over God's holy city, right? So, there the power, that's the 10 thrones mentioned. And then the lion is how it speaks. That's the dominion, the proclamation, right? So, the authority. So there's power and authority are a little different, right? They're not quite the same thing, but we read it, right? Dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. So we see those three things related to the three animals. Guess what? Those three things also relate to the three offices of Scripture, which are, do you remember what the three offices of Scripture are? Christ holds all three. What is the threefold offices of Christ? Yes. Not necessarily in that order. Normally it's said prophet, priest, king, I think. But any order is fine. Okay? So, we see all those. Who's the priest? No, I won't test you on this, right? That might be too much, right? It's an evening service. If it was a morning service, I'd close it. Right? It's the leopard, right? Because that's the image. The image is the priestly image. The image of God is a priestly marker. In the same way that if you're in the image of Christ, that's a priestly marker. Okay? Who's the king? That would be the bear. Because he's got the power. He's got the power to trample. Which leaves the lion, the voice, as the prophetic. All right, that one should have been on. Maybe I should have led with that one. Gave you the easy one, right, to begin with. Okay, that's the prophetic. Well, we also see then a false trinity here. The leopard is the spirit. The bear is the father, he's the king, right? And the son is the word. It also brings us back to the fruit in the garden. The leopard is the eyes, the image. The bear is what is good that's desire to make wise, kingliness, and then the good for food is the lion, the prophetic. All right, so you see all three of those things, and I'm sure I don't want to belabor the point, but what I'm trying to get at here is the perversion of the image. It's a perversion, and so it's taking all these biblically rich images and perverting them into this Gentile, draconic form. We read on verse 3. And I saw one of his heads, as if it had been slain fatally, and his fatal wound was healed, and the whole land marveled and followed after the beast. All right, who is this? You've got a lot of theories on this one, okay? A lot of theories on who this fatally wounded head is. There's some, if you're a futurist, are going to say some future guy. It's the Antichrist who's going to get shot, right? And then he's going to miraculously come back to life. That's, you watch your Left Behind movies or whatnot. That's normally what happens. There's the false prophet is the one that resurrects him from the grave, and you don't really see that anywhere. but anyways, point is, that's not it. Right? We're just going to X that one out. The other two options are Nero or Julius Caesar. I say it could be really both, in that Julius Caesar, in a sense, heralds forth what is going to happen to Nero. In both cases, Rome is fatally wounded, but then comes back. And it's a marvel. It's a marvel that Rome is able to survive such a costly event. But I think Julius Caesar's fits more, given the outline of our passage here. It just makes more sense. Julius Caesar is assassinated, and the empire is devoured by chaos, and as I mentioned before, in that war between Mark Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus. But there is a resurrection of this fatally wounded head, and we mentioned him already. Octavian. He is resurrected no longer as Octavian, but as Augustus, and he is resurrected in power at the time of Christ. Okay? Christ comes into the world at that time. And who is amazed? The land. The land is amazed. Rome is not swept away like the previous beasts were. Okay? The previous beasts, they all got swept away. Babylon was conquered by Cyrus. Persia was conquered by Alexander. Hellas was conquered by Rome. But now Rome is conquered by whom? Rome. So they're amazed. They're amazed. Now Nero plays this out in his lifetime, right? This is what I was referring to with that overlap. Okay? Nero is the overlap from the old Rome to the new Rome. Because what does Nero do? We've mentioned this several times. What does Nero do? He burns Rome down. And he's going to do what? Replace it. Right? We're going to recall this place of Rome. Very unfortunate this fire happened. We're going to rename it Neropolis. Not after anyone particular, Nero says. Neropolis. Imperial Rome is overcoming the Hellenism. Right, so that's the fatally wound. The fatal wound. And Julius Caesar's assassination, Octavian's resurrection, Nero's burning of Rome, the resurrection of the Roman city. I remember who was made the scapegoat of the burning of Rome were the Christians. Right? So verses 4 and 5 continue us. And they worship the dragon. So who's worshiping them? The land. Okay? So the apostate Jews are worshiping, they're worshiping Rome. And you say, well, that can't be. They never did that. No, did they not? We have no king but Caesar. Okay? It's a worship. It's a worship. They gave homage to not the son, lest he be provoked to anger. They gave homage to Caesar. So they worshipped him. They worshipped the beast, saying, who is like the beast? And who is able to wage war with him? And there was given to him a mouth speaking great boasts and blasphemies, and authority to act for 42 months was given to him. Excuse me. So the living worship begins for the dragon through image. All right. I say that because Nero really begins that. There was emperor worship, but it was in the likes of ancestral worship. That was common throughout history. You see that a lot. Somebody dies, and you're like, oh, well, now we're going to worship this guy. You see that it's way back as some of the earliest pagan literature we have. The Epic of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh is, I think it's father or grandfather, maybe both, but they're both referred to as gods. But when described, they don't seem to have really done anything other than been really cool action heroes on Earth, right? So they aren't brought into the celestial pantheon. They didn't do anything in creation or anything like that. They just sort of did some cool stuff on Earth, and so when they died, they become gods. So that's and that was happening. When Julius Caesar died, at his funeral, a comet passes by, and so they said, surely he's the divine one. And that's when Augustus received the title Augustus, right? But now we've moved beyond. We're worshiping the guy that did some cool stuff while he was alive. Now let's worship him while he's still alive. Why is that significant? Again, I'm bringing us back to the historical point of Rome. Okay? When Rome came into being, for a little time they had kings. That's the one thing Rome hates. Kings. We will never have a king, because there was this tyrant Turnus, or Turnus is the image of that tyrant in the Aeneid, but there's this tyrant that comes, and he was so awful that when they got rid of him, they said, Rome will never have a king rule over it. So what did they have for a really long time? The Republic. Right? And then Julius Caesar. And even when Julius Caesar is slain by a guy who is also named Brutus, who defeated the first tyrant, who's actually a descendant of the very same, even when that time comes, when Octavian becomes emperor, does he claim to be king? No, he claims to be emperor. I'm not king. I'm not a king. Nero is beginning to do that when he claims he is a god while alive. It's one thing Greeks and Greco-Roman doesn't deal with. They don't believe that their living leaders are gods, because that means they can be a tyrant, right? I mean, if you're a god, surely you get to rule however you want. That's what Nero is saying. So the ancestral worship was common, but deification was rejected. Now it's coming into being. The worshiping of the emperor while still alive was the end of Hellas. And Nero is the first guy that was really of the emperors. And you got some strange ones in there, like Caligula and so forth. But Nero was really the first one that said, oh no, yeah, call me God. I am very much that. Do call me that. And so, what does Nero do, unlike all the other Roman emperors? He attacks the Christians. Tiberius may have become a Christian, right? The Emperor Tiberius, he may have become a Christian. We don't know for certain, but we know that his household was being preached to and they're receiving. And by the way, household doesn't just mean his family members. That means it's like counselors. Right? That's in his court. That's his government was becoming Christian. And Tiberius was at least influenced enough by Christianity that he told the Senate to recognize Jesus Christ as a God. He didn't tell them to recognize him as the God, so we're not entirely certain. Maybe he was trying to do a political thing there and sort of, work his way towards that. We don't know. We don't know where that came from, but we do know that Tiberius did say, we must recognize Jesus Christ as a God. Okay? So there was some kind of influence on him. Positive Christian influence upon him. Caligula and some of the other guys, they're apathetic towards Christians, really. They don't really care. They're sort of, get along. But they'll also expel the Jews out of Rome. And that happens, that's where the Epistle of Rome comes for. Not fans of the Jews. Christians, no, I don't really care. Do whatever you want. Let me have my horse be a senator. That's his thing. Nero's the first one that says, I'm going to kill these Christians. I'm going to devour them. I'm going to do horrible things to them. I'm going to dress up in lion's skin, chase after them naked, and eat their body parts. I'm going to light them on fire at night, alive, so that I have candles around. Horrific things. That's Nero who does this. That is the apostasy of the beast. Now, listen to the language here. who is like the beast. Right? Where have we heard that before? Michael. Right? Do you remember what Michael means? Who is like God. So the beast takes on this name. Micah-ha-hi. I'm not going to try and say that quickly because there's too many syllables there of the same sound. Okay? Michael, who is like God. Micah-ha-hi, who is like the beast. It's a counterfeit name. Right? I keep wanting you to see this, that this counterfeit beast is trying to take on these counterfeit and perverted imaging of God. It is asserting itself in God's place. That is the beast. And they say, who can defeat? Who is able to wage war with him? Well, we actually already have the answer to that, don't we? Back in chapter 12. Who threw the dragon out of heaven? Michael. Jesus is able to defeat him. Michael can defeat Micah-ha-hi. Jesus is going to defeat Rome. He is. Now, the worship of power that the Jews engage in, is with the false New Testament. Okay? You know this? There's two New Testaments. There's our New Testament, and there's the Jewish New Testament. Okay? The Jews started getting impatient with God. They weren't willing to wait for Jesus to come, so they started writing their own New Testament. You know what we call that? We call that the Mishnah. All right? And what has now been preserved of that is the commentary on the Mishnah, which is called the Talmud. Okay? That's their New Testament. Because they recognize, and we would recognize this too, right? You read the Old Testament. If we just read the Old Testament, what would we all be doing? Where's the ending? It's got to be complete. There needs to be a completion. They're waiting for a completion, right? So they start writing their own. Rather than waiting upon God, who comes to them. The Word of God, Jesus Christ, comes to them, and now we have received the true New Testament. But there's this false New Testament, and that's the Mishnah and the Talmud that comes out of impatience, and that is where you begin to read of the worship of power. And so they were ready when the beast exalted himself. They were ready to say, yes, let us worship Caesar. Let us worship Caesar, because that's where the power is, and that's what we're going to worship. Well, we read then, following on verses 6 through 9. And he opened his mouth in blasphemies against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle. That is, those who dwell in heaven. And it was also given to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority over every tribe and people and tongue and nation was given to him. And all who dwell on the land will worship him. Everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who has been slain. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. All right, so he is given power for blasphemy against God and his tabernacle. The tabernacle are described to us as those who are tabernacled with God in heaven. So that's the saints. That's us, by the way. We currently, if you believe in Jesus Christ and have been saved by his blood, we currently are tabernacled with God where? In heaven. Paul says you are seated in the heavenlies. So we're there. That's who he's attacking. That's where the blasphemies are against. And he gets 42 months. Those are moons. Right? We've been saying this throughout the chapters, right? We've got moons and days. Days relates to the work of the saints because we live in the day. Moons relates to the apostate Israel because they're under the moon times, right? The moon festivals. So, by the way, we celebrate Easter, as we call it, every Lord's Day because it's the Lord's Day. They celebrate it on a shifting, moving day. Why is Easter always moving in April? And I think sometimes it's even in March. I could be wrong about that. But why is it always moving? It's because it's based on the moon. It's the moon calendar. That's why it's always moving around. Because your first day of the month is the full moon. Right? Or rather, sorry, I believe it's actually the new moon is the first out of darkness. Right? And so, it's 42 moons of bare trampling. Right? He's trampling again. We mentioned this before. This is the end of 64 to 68 AD. And this is when the 3 emperors die in a few months, and then the persecution ends. Right? Nero is forced to kill himself, and then you get a bunch of emperors that go, or a bunch of generals who say, I can make a good emperor. And then they'd be there for about 3 months, and then another guy would kill him, and he'd say, I think I could be a good emperor. And I think the last guy, I think it was Olba, I think he's only there for a week, and then and then finally it ends, the chaos ends with Vespasian. Okay? Vespasian is the guy who's destroying the temple and killing all of the Jews, the apostate Jews. We haven't gotten there yet, but he's the one that's doing all that. He comes back and becomes the new emperor, begins a new dynasty, and his son Titus will continue that on both the destruction of the temple and the imperial throne. But you also see an end to imperial worship in that sense. There are still some cults in Asia Minor after that. But anyways, we have here the Great Tribulation described to us. Okay, and notice what he is given. It's given to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and authority over every tribe, people, tongue, nation. All right, we've seen this, and we're going to see this 7 times throughout Revelation. I can't quite recall off the top of my head what number we're at here. I think we're maybe 4 or 5. But notably, it is tongue. Originally, it's tongue, tribe, nation, people. Right? That's the order of history. Tongue, tribe, nation, people. Who is that describing? Tongue brings us back to what? Babel. So that's the patriarchs. Tribe. When are we dealing with tribes? We're at Sinai, right? So it's the Sinaitic covenant. Nation. When is Israel fighting against nations, other nations? It's during the kings. Okay. And then peoples. When are we dealing with giant groups of peoples against the imperial powers, right? So that's history. Is patriarchs, Sinai, kingdom, empire. And now they're being given this power to attack the church. The beast is given. All right? And I want us to see the contrast here. And don't worry, we're almost over, I promise. I see I've been going for a very long time. The beast is given tribe, people, tongue, nation, but the Lamb ransoms tribe, tongue, people, nation. Okay, you say, I don't know if you were writing it down or if you noticed, but it's a little different. It's a little different. The middle bit has been swapped. Okay, the middle bit has been swapped. So, tribe is in the same place at the beginning. Nation is in the same place at the end. But in the middle, people and tongue have been reversed. What do we make of that? Here's what I make of it. That for the Lamb, confession from the tongue precedes empire. For the beast, empire precedes confession. Meaning what? It is the empire that's being confessed. Whereas with the Lamb is being confessed, and so an empire is given. And we read that in Daniel, right? Daniel 7. We read that here even in Revelation 5. That because Christ has done this thing, then the people are able to confess, now here is this empire given to Christ. The empire of the world, and I mean cosmos world there, is given to the Lamb. So for the Lamb, confession precedes empire. For the beast, empire precedes confession. We should consider that today, especially among political discussion. That our confession of Jesus Christ must come before our empire building. We must not empire build and then begin confessing, because we will be confessing the empire, not the Lamb. You can see in history how things have ended up perverted like that. Where Britain was once the empire in which the sun never set. Right? The sun definitely sets on it now. Okay? They've lost a lot of land. But there was a time where it was a really godly Christian empire, and it was exporting Christ because Christ was their confession. Then there were other times where Christ was not their confession. What was their confession? Britain. The British imperial rule was their confession. And what happened when they did that? They lost it all. God took it from them. God took Britain's imperial power from them. They did great work. I mean, you really cannot, I know that you got all this sort of woke history now and everything, but you cannot understate how much of the world is Christian today because of the British Empire. The possibilities and the avenues they were given because they were Imperial Britain. How were the British missionaries able to get into China? Because the British government owned China, all right? How are these British missionaries able to preach to these African tribes? Because the British were there. How did America become a Christian nation? Because it was English. They didn't come over here and say, well, we're not doing the Christian thing anymore. No, we're bringing the Christian thing over here, and we're going to Christianize. How did Christianity end up among the natives? Because a certain Scotsman, right, he counts. He's British, right, he counts. A certain Scotsman named David Brainerd, yeah, he does. He goes out to the natives and he preaches the gospel to them. Empire can be a means of good, but only when it is confessing Christ. When empire is confessing itself, when its borders are, all it's ever concerned about is its particular borders increasing, not the borders of Christ's kingdom increasing, it is doomed to be destroyed. It is doomed to fall. And I'm not saying that it was just like there's this one period where Britain was Christ exalting and this one period where it wasn't. It went back and forth, right? At good times and bad times, right? But nevertheless, we can seek that sort of empire, the empire of Christ in our day. Hey, we could have the Masaryktown, empire, if we confess the Lamb. But if we're confessing Masaryktown or Brooksville or Hernando or even Florida, if we're saying, look, the conservative values of Florida are just going to come out into the rest of the country, we're going to fall. If we're not exalting Christ, if Christ is not our confession, if Florida and its greatness is our confession, we celebrate America's 250. We heard a lot of great things about our country. If America is our confession and not Christ, our empire will fail. And do not be remotely confused. America is most certainly an empire in this world today. It is. You can pretend to be other things. Like, Rome was an empire even as a republic. We're a republic. You can still be an empire. The two are not mutually exclusive. We are an empire. But we are a dying empire because we don't confess Christ. What does our empire give the world? Gives transgender studies to Pakistan. That's a true thing. I'm not making that up. That's our imperialism. That does not last. God will not let that abide. Teaching others how to mutilate their children. All right. Verse 10. If anyone is destined for captivity, to captivity he goes. If anyone kills with the sword he must be killed. Here is the perseverance and the faith of the saints. We have predestinate ends, beloved. Those who are written in the book of life from the beginning, because of the work of the Lamb, they'll be saved. But those who are destined for captivity, to captivity he must go. Anyone who kills with the sword, by the sword he must be killed. Why is this the perseverance of the saints? Because we're learning something about God here. We're told something about God. God is the eye for eye God. He is the tooth for tooth God. He is the life for life God. That is, he is the just judge. He will vindicate everything. All right? Someone may come and pluck out your eye right now. You aren't given the opportunity to pluck his eye out. God never plucks his eye out, it should seem. But actually, at the end of time, when the curtain roll calls, we all have to stand up in front of the great judge on the white throne, that eye will be plucked, as it were. Okay? I don't mean that in a literal sense, but maybe it will be. I don't know. We're not giving much description on that. But the point is, you will be vindicated. You will be justified before everything. And by the way, this did happen. They didn't have to wait for Judgment Day. All right? Apostate Judea was put into captivity, and they were slain by the sword. I want us to notice this. It was also given to him to make war with the saints and to conquer them. The beast was given power to conquer the saints. That was given to them. God gives that power all the time in the world. Right? What happens out in the third world? Okay? Happens all the time. Christians come there, and what happens? Old paganism, instantly dead, right? What happens after that? Always it's the same process, because it's been written in God's word, and it'll always happen this way. Christians will come in, and Christianity will have amazing success and totally defeat the pagans. And then what happens? A beast is summoned, and God gives them power. And in Africa and in Asia, it's been called communism. And power is given to the beast, and that beast swallows them up, eats them whole, kills them, conquers them, so that when we say conquer, they're dead. Christianity will die. But this is the perseverance of the saints, beloved, that Christ's church has died many times, but always comes back up and follows her master out of the tomb, out of the grave. We have that comfort, beloved, knowing that the Lord is the judge of all, and he is the master over death. He has been given the keys of the grave. He owns it. It belongs to him. Death has no power over us anymore. The man who tries to take our life has power over us. So that the one who fears for his own life, he'll be condemned. But if he fears the God who holds both the life and the soul in his hand, he will be saved. So, here are our applications this evening. Guardians, this is number one. Guardians, and I'm speaking beast guardians here, protect the church when the church is about the business, as the winds of God. All right? If we're doing the work of the winds, as little zephyrs, as we're called in Zechariah, hey, guardian beasts will come up. And again, you see this throughout history. All right? What happened to Martin Luther in the midst of his time? How did Martin Luther escape death numerous times? A certain beast was raised up. The fellow's name is escaping my mind, but he was the Duke of Saxony. All right? I remember where he's from. Right? The Duke of Saxony. He kidnaps him. Wait, that's not a good thing. No, it was. He kidnapped him and hid him away in a castle, gave him a new name so that people wouldn't come and kill him. And he gave him safety. And what was the result of that? The Bible was translated into German for the first time. And that was significant. Some of our first English Bibles were translated from Latin, and then others were translated from the German into English. It wasn't until Tyndale that we got our Hebrew and Greek directly translated into the English, right? And so, those guardians come. We got to be about the business. Don't expect that guardian beast to come and protect the church if you're not even doing it. This is a big thing. You talk, our beloved friend and elder, Jerry Campbell, talks about with Christians being involved in politics, and others have talked about this too. But you know, when Christians show up suddenly at county commission meetings because of a single issue that popped up on the agenda, but they've never been there before, you think that suddenly they're going to listen to us Christians? Something comes up about abortion. All of a sudden, the whole room is filled with Christians. Where were you when we were discussing rezoning? No one wants to be there for that. What does a Christian have to say about that? Christians, you have something to say about everything. This whole planet is your dominion through Jesus Christ. Don't just show up and expect the beast to suddenly know who you are. I'm going back to our analogy of the dog here, right? The dog at home. Don't just show up once every year and expect that dog to know who you are and to guard you. Love the dog, right? Love the dog. I know this is probably terrible. I'm referring to our government officials as dogs here, but love them. Feed them with the Word of God. Pray for them. Make it known that you're praying for them. We try to do that. Try to make it known that each of our commissioners here in Hernando know that we're praying for them. I haven't gotten to all of them yet, but I'm working on it. I'm working to get into all of them. Tell them, how can we be praying for you? Here's a good one, and you guys can do this personally, but I definitely encourage it as churches especially to do this. Ask them, what's something you and you know human power cannot accomplish? I'll pray God can accomplish it for you. Do you know why? And I try to ask. I haven't been that successful yet, but I try to ask. Be very specific. Why do I say that? So I want them to know when that prayer is answered, it was not man, it was God. And it was on behalf of the church that God answered that for him. Right? All right. We eat after, so I can keep going on this. So let me move on to the next application. Right? 2, do not be amazed by false messiahs. That's what happened. Right? That's what happened to the apostate Jews. They were amazed by power. We'll see that again. They're amazed by power. And again, beloved, this can happen to any one of us. There's a whole movement, and unfortunately a good chunk of Christians are maligned. All of Christianity is maligned with this, I think, rather fringe group, I must be honest. I think it's fringe. I don't think it's that big. But there's this group. There are these Christians that are they're MAGA Christians, right? They're not Christians. They're worshiping the power of a demagogue, all right? And does our president feed into that? Sure. But that's besides the point. The point are the worshipers themselves, right? The beast is its own thing, really. We're not really given that much dealt with the beast itself, as much as those who worship the beast to get all the trouble, all the condemnation thrown upon them. And so, do not be amazed by false messiahs. Sometimes they will do incredible things, and things that look like it's in our favor. Here's one. If you believe that sect is anti-God, and the beast starts killing them, you're amazed. God is really for us. God is killing those Christians. That means we're right, said the apostate Jew, before that same beast turned on him and swallowed them all. Do not be amazed by false messiahs. That is the end. Right? I want that to be very clear. The false messiah ends up eating you. I'll make a comment about that after, when we go to eat, because I could give you a very specific example of that with our current administration. All right, 3. God is a just God. He will vindicate his saints. That's because we got a lot here, and the same thing as we got with the names of Satan. Sometimes we're so focused on, and it is our text, but sometimes we're so focused on the enemy and the description that we're given that we're not seeing ourselves and what we are gleaning from it. This is the big thing that we glean, that God is for us. Who could be against us? Amen? God is for us. Who can be against us? This text challenges us on that question, right? Well, actually, the beast can be against us because he can give them authority. But at the end of all things, what does Paul say? Nor heights, nor depths, angels, man, sword, pestilence, on and on he goes. None of that can separate us from the love of God. That is the vindication we have in Jesus Christ. All right, I know that was a long one.